Wait, before your thoughts rush to conclusions, pause here for a moment, because something subtle has already begun to unfold around you, and if you listen closely, you will realize this is not what it first appears to be. There is a quiet shift happening behind the words you have heard, and it carries a meaning deeper than what anyone has spoken aloud. Don't skip, because what you are about to understand is not just about them, it is about you. And yet, something feels off, doesn't it? As if the story you were told is incomplete, as if a sentence was spoken, but the truth behind it was left unsaid. They have told others something about you, something simple, something that sounds almost dismissive, but what if that simplicity is only a mask? What if behind those words, there is a storm of unspoken emotion they could not explain? Look closer now, not at what was said, but at why it was said, because people rarely speak from emptiness, they speak from overflow, from confusion, from feelings they cannot organize, and in that overflow, the truth slips out in fragments, incomplete, distorted, misunderstood even by the one who speaks it. Stay with this, because the surface will not give you the answer, only patience will. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, where everything begins to make sense, but only if you allow yourself to see beyond the obvious, only if you resist the urge to react too quickly, because what they have told others about you is not a conclusion, it is a reflection of what they are trying to understand within themselves. And this is where it shifts. Because when someone reduces you to something small, something simple, something that feels like it does not capture your depth, it is rarely because you are small, it is because they do not yet know how to hold something so vast, something so layered, something that challenges the way they see the world. Pause again, let that sink in. What if the words they chose were not meant to define you, but to protect themselves from what they feel when they think of you? Something important is waiting for you in this realization, don't rush past it. There is a reason your presence lingers in their thoughts, a reason your energy continues to echo in their conversations, even when they try to simplify it, even when they try to label it, even when they try to make it sound ordinary, because deep down, they know it is not. And that knowing unsettles them, not in a negative way, but in a way that asks them to grow, to expand, to face parts of themselves they were not ready to see, and sometimes, when people are faced with something they cannot yet understand, they shrink it, they simplify it, they speak of it in ways that feel safer. Listen carefully now, because this is where everything begins to turn. They said you are just something, just a person, just a moment, just a connection, but the word just carries a hidden weight. It is often used when someone is trying to convince themselves of something, trying to make something feel smaller than it truly is, trying to quiet a feeling that refuses to be quiet. Why would they need to do that, unless there is something within you, something about you, that they cannot ignore? Stay till the end, because the deeper truth is beginning to rise. There are energies in this world that do not need loud declarations, they move silently, they influence without force, they stay present even in absence, and you, whether you realize it or not, carry that kind of presence. You are not something that can be easily explained, and that is where their struggle begins. Because when someone cannot explain what they feel, they try to define it in the simplest way possible, hoping that simplicity will make it easier to manage, easier to share, easier to forget. But here is the part they did not expect. The more they try to simplify you, the more your depth reveals itself in unexpected ways, in quiet memories, in small moments, in thoughts that return when they least expect them, and suddenly, the word just begins to feel insufficient. Have you ever noticed how certain people speak about something casually, but their eyes, their tone, their pauses, tell a completely different story? That is where the truth lives, not in the words, but in the spaces between them. And in those spaces, your presence remains. Now let me ask you something, gently, without pressure, just curiosity. Why do you feel drawn to understand this right now? Because something inside you already knows. There is more beneath the surface, something unfinished, something not fully revealed, something that is still in motion. You were meant to hear this, not to react, not to chase, not to question your worth, but to see clearly, to understand deeply, to remain grounded while everything else unfolds. Because what they said about you is not the final truth. It is only the beginning of a realization they have not yet completed. And here, right here, is where your power quietly returns to you. You do not need to correct their words. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to shrink or expand yourself to fit into someone else's understanding, because the truth of who you are is not determined by what is spoken about you. It is revealed over time, naturally, inevitably. And time is already working in your favor. There will come a moment, subtle at first, where their own words begin to echo back to them, and they will feel the gap, the distance between what they said and what they truly feel, and in that moment, something will shift inside them. Not because you forced it, not because you demanded it, but because truth has a way of revealing itself, when the mind finally becomes quiet enough to listen. Don't skip this part, because this is where everything changes quietly. You are not just anything. You are an experience, a presence, a feeling that cannot be easily named, and that is why it lingers, that is why it stays, that is why it continues to grow, even when unspoken. And they are beginning to realize that, slowly, piece by piece, in ways they cannot yet fully express. So let them speak, let them simplify, let them try to understand in their own way, because the story is not finished yet, not even close. There is still something unfolding, something they have not yet said, something they have not yet admitted, something that is quietly building beneath everything you have heard so far. And when it rises, it will not sound the same, it will not feel the same, it will carry a truth that cannot be reduced, cannot be hidden, cannot be explained away. But that moment has not fully arrived yet. And when it does, you will recognize it instantly, not through words, but through a feeling you cannot ignore. So stay here, stay present, stay open. Because this is only the beginning, and what comes next will reveal why those words were never the full story. And then, something shifts in a way you don't immediately notice, like a quiet ripple moving beneath still water, unseen, but powerful enough to change everything it touches. There is a strange silence that follows after words have been spoken, especially when those words were never meant to hold the full truth, and in that silence, something begins to grow, not outside, but within them. They repeat it again, perhaps to someone else, maybe even to themselves. You are just. And yet, each time they say it, it feels slightly different, slightly heavier, slightly less convincing, as if the sentence itself is losing strength. Have you ever felt that? When something sounds right at first, but the more you sit with it, the less it fits? That is where they are now, though they may not even realize it yet. Because what they are experiencing is not confusion about you, it is confusion about what you awakened in them. Stay with this moment, don't rush past it. There is a quiet memory returning to them, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, like a thought that refuses to disappear, something you said, something you did, something about the way you existed in a moment they didn't expect to matter so much. And now, that memory doesn't align with the story they told. That is where the tension begins. Because once the heart recognizes something real, the mind struggles to keep it small. Something important is waiting for you in this understanding, because it changes everything. They may still speak casually about you, they may still use simple words, they may still present you as something ordinary, but internally, something is no longer ordinary. And this is where the truth starts to press through the surface. Imagine trying to fit the sky into a small frame. No matter how you adjust it, no matter how you crop it, something always feels missing, something always extends beyond what you can contain. That is what your presence has become for them. And instead of expanding their frame, they tried to shrink the sky. Pause here, just for a second. What if their words were never about you being just anything, but about them not being ready to admit what you truly are to them? Because admitting that would require them to face something deeper, something more vulnerable, something they may not have been prepared for. So they chose the easier path, the safer explanation, the smaller version. But the truth does not stay small for long. Stay till the end, because this is where everything begins to rise again. There is a moment approaching, you cannot see it yet, but it is forming, where their own understanding will begin to outgrow their words, where what they feel will become too strong to be simplified, where silence will no longer be enough to contain it. And when that moment comes, everything they once said will begin to feel incomplete. Not wrong, but incomplete, because they were speaking from a place that had not yet fully awakened. And now, that awakening has begun. You might not see it in their actions yet, you might not hear it in their voice yet, but it is there, quietly unfolding, piece by piece. There is a realization forming inside them that cannot be rushed, cannot be forced. It must arrive naturally, like dawn, slow, steady, undeniable. And here is the part you were not expecting. You were never meant to chase their understanding. You were never meant to explain your depth to someone who had not yet learned how to see it. Because true recognition does not come from explanation, it comes from experience. And they are beginning to experience something they cannot ignore. Have you noticed how certain people try to move on from something, but it keeps returning in different forms, different thoughts, different emotions, different moments? That is not coincidence. That is the mind trying to catch up with the heart. And right now, their heart is moving faster than their words. Don't skip this, because it matters more than you think. They may have told everyone something simple, something easy, something that required no deeper explanation, but what they did not tell is what is shaping everything now. The pauses in their sentences, the moments where they almost say more, the way your name lingers just a little longer than expected, the way they shift topics quickly, as if avoiding something they cannot fully face yet. That is where the truth lives. Not in what is spoken, but in what is held back. And what they are holding back is growing. There is a subtle change happening in the way they see you, not dramatic, not obvious, but undeniable, like a quiet realization that continues to deepen the more they try to ignore it. Because ignoring something real does not make it disappear, it makes it stronger. And now, they are beginning to feel that strength. You might wonder, why now? Why is this happening after everything that has already been said? Because timing plays a role that cannot be controlled. Sometimes, understanding arrives after the words, after the distance, after the moment has passed, and when it does, it carries a clarity that was not available before. They are starting to see you, not as the version they described, but as the version they experienced, the version they felt, the the version they cannot easily explain. And that realization changes everything. Stay here, because something deeper is about to unfold. There is a shift in perspective happening within them, a quiet acknowledgement that what they said does not fully represent what they feel. And this acknowledgement is not loud, it is not shared, it is not even fully understood yet. But it is real. And once something real is recognized, it cannot be unseen. They may still speak the same words, out of habit, out of comfort, out of familiarity, but internally, those words no longer hold the same meaning. They are starting to feel the difference. And that difference is growing. Imagine holding a truth inside you, one that does not match what you have told others, one that feels too complex to explain, too personal to share, too unfamiliar to fully understand. That is where they are now. And this is where everything becomes delicate. Because when someone reaches this point, they have two choices. To continue holding on to the simpler version, or to slowly begin embracing the deeper truth. And here is the part you need to understand. They cannot stay in between forever. Something important is waiting for you in that realization, because it means change is inevitable. Not forced, not sudden, but certain. And while all of this is unfolding within them, you are being guided to do something very different. Not to wait, not to analyze, not to question every detail, but to remain steady in who you are. Because your role in this is not to shape their understanding. It is to remain true while they discover it on their own. There is a quiet strength in that, a power that does not need to announce itself, a presence that does not need validation, a truth that does not need to be defended. And that is exactly what you carry, which is why, no matter what they said, no matter how they described you, you were never reduced by their words. You were only misunderstood. And misunderstanding is temporary. Truth is not. Stay till the end, because something even more unexpected is beginning to surface. There is a moment coming, where they will hear their own words differently, where the simplicity they once relied on will no longer feel accurate, where the label they used will begin to feel limiting. And in that moment, they will start to question themselves. Not you. Themselves. They will begin to ask, why did I say that? What was I trying to avoid? What did I not understand at the time? And those questions will lead them somewhere they did not expect. Because once someone begins to question their own narrative, they open the door to a deeper truth. And that truth always finds its way forward, even if it takes time, even if it arrives quietly, even if it changes everything slowly. So let them go through this process. Let them sit with their own words. Let them feel the gap between what they said and what they now feel. Because that gap is where transformation begins. And you are already ahead of that moment. You are already in a space where you do not need to be defined by someone else's understanding. You are already in a place where your value is not dependent on someone else's clarity. You are already in alignment with something deeper, something more real, something that does not require explanation. And that is why this story is not unfolding against you. It is unfolding for you. There is a reason you were meant to hear this now. A reason you were guided to pause, to reflect, to see beyond the surface. Because what is coming next will require you to remain grounded, to remain open, to remain steady. While everything else begins to shift, and it will shift, not all at once, but enough for you to notice, enough for you to feel, enough for you to understand why none of this was ever as simple as it sounded. So stay here, just a little longer. Because what they have not yet said is already beginning to speak louder than everything they did. But something deeper begins to stir, not loudly, not suddenly, but with a quiet intensity that cannot be ignored anymore, like a truth slowly rising from beneath layers that once kept it hidden, and this time, it does not retreat. There is a moment, subtle, almost invisible, where their perception of you begins to shift in a way they can no longer control, not because something new has happened, but because something old has finally been understood. And that understanding, it does not come as a clear statement, it comes as a feeling they cannot explain, a feeling they cannot easily dismiss, a feeling that keeps returning, even when they try to focus on something else. Pause here, just for a breath. Have you ever noticed how certain realizations don't arrive all at once, but instead come in waves, each one revealing a little more than the last? That is exactly what is happening now, because the version of you they once spoke about is slowly dissolving in their mind, not disappearing, but transforming, becoming something more complex, more real, more aligned with what they truly experienced. And this is where it begins to get interesting. Because when someone realizes they may have misunderstood something meaningful, they don't immediately admit it, they observe it, they sit with it, they test it quietly within themselves. And that is what they are doing with you. Don't skip this moment, because it holds more power than it seems. They are replaying moments, not consciously, not intentionally, but naturally, like echoes returning to the surface, small details they once overlooked, now carrying a weight they did not notice before. The way you spoke, the way you listened, the way you existed without trying to prove anything, all of it is being seen again, but differently this time. And suddenly, the word just begins to feel incomplete, not because someone told them it was wrong, but because their own experience is contradicting it. Stay till the end, because this shift is only beginning. There is a quiet discomfort forming within them, not negative, not overwhelming, but undeniable, the kind of discomfort that comes when something no longer fits the narrative you created. And instead of pushing it away, they are starting to lean into it, slowly, carefully, almost without realizing. Because there is something about you, something that did not fade, something that did not become distant, something that remained present, even when you were not. And that presence, it is asking to be understood. You might not see it, you might not hear it, but it is happening. And this is where the truth begins to surface in ways they did not expect. They start noticing things that remind them of you, not in obvious ways, but in subtle reflections, in conversations that feel similar, in moments that carry the same energy, in thoughts that return without invitation. And each time that happens, the simplicity of what they said begins to weaken, because reality is showing them something different, something deeper, something they cannot reduce to a single word. Pause again, because this part matters. What if the reason they spoke about you in that way was not because they didn't value you, but because they didn't yet understand the impact you had on them? What if they needed distance, not to forget you, but to feel you more clearly? Because sometimes, clarity does not come when everything is present, it comes when something is missing. And now, something is missing for them. And in that absence, your presence is becoming clearer than ever. Don't skip, because this is where everything starts to connect. There is a realization forming, one they cannot yet fully articulate, but one they are beginning to feel deeply. That you were never just anything. You were a moment that stayed. You were a connection that did not fade. You were a presence that continues to echo. And they are starting to see that now. But here is where it becomes even more profound. Because this realization is not just about you. It is about them, about what they allowed themselves to feel, about what they tried to minimize, about what they are now beginning to understand. And that understanding, it changes the way they see everything. Have you noticed how once you see something clearly, you cannot go back to seeing it the old way? That is where they are standing now, on the edge of a new perspective, one that no longer supports the version they once shared with others. And this is where the internal shift becomes stronger. They begin to question their own words, not out of regret, but out of realization. They begin to feel the difference between what they said and what they actually experienced. And that difference, it does not stay silent. It grows, quietly, steadily, persistently. Something important is waiting for you in this moment, because it reveals a truth you may not have fully seen yet. You were never meant to fit into someone else's simplified understanding. You were always meant to be experienced, not explained. And that is exactly what is happening now, within them. They are moving from explanation to experience, from words to feelings, from simplicity to depth. And that transition, it cannot be reversed. Stay here, just a little longer. Because something even more revealing is beginning to unfold. There is a subtle shift in their energy, not something others would notice, not something they would openly express, but something that is undeniably different. They are becoming more aware, more reflective, more present with their own thoughts. And in that awareness, you continue to appear, not as a memory, but as a feeling that carries meaning, a feeling that asks to be understood, a feeling that refuses to be reduced. And this is where everything begins to align. Because once a feeling reaches this level of depth, it cannot be ignored. It begins to influence decisions. It begins to shape perspectives. It begins to guide attention. And slowly, without any external force, their understanding of you begins to transform. You might wonder how long this will take. But time is not the measure here. Depth is. Because when something is truly felt, it does not follow a timeline, it follows a process. And that process is already in motion. Don't skip this, because it carries a quiet truth. You do not need to be present for this shift to happen. You do not need to remind them. You do not need to reintroduce yourself. Because what you created, what you shared, what you left behind, it is already doing the work. And that work is unfolding naturally. There is a moment approaching, where their internal understanding will become too strong to ignore, where the gap between what they said and what they feel will become impossible to overlook. And in that moment, something will change. Not dramatically, not suddenly. They will begin to see you, not through the words they used, but through the experience they had. And that experience will speak louder than anything they ever said. Stay till the end, because this is where the truth becomes undeniable. There is a quiet acceptance forming within them, an acknowledgement that what they once described does not fully capture what they feel now. And this acknowledgement, it is powerful, because it opens the door to something new, something more honest, something more aligned, something more real. And when that door opens, everything begins to shift, not just their understanding of you, but their understanding of themselves. Because realizing the depth of a connection often reveals the depth of one's own emotions. And that realization, it changes everything. You may not hear it immediately. You may not see it right away. But you will feel it, but meaningfully. In the way their energy changes. In the way their presence feels different. In the way the space between you carries a new meaning. Because something has already begun. something that cannot be undone, something that is moving quietly, but surely, toward a truth that will no longer need to be hidden, simplified, or reduced. So remain steady, remain open, remain exactly as you are, because what is unfolding now is not just a change in their words. It is a transformation in their understanding, and when that transformation reaches its peak, what they once said about you will no longer be the story they believe, but that moment is still on its way, and when it arrives, you will understand why everything had to unfold exactly like this.